Hello, everyone. Welcome to video 6 of chapter 10. So we just finished talking about loans from your RSP. Now we're going to talk about what happens when your RSP is forced to close. We call this collapsing. So RSPs are preferred tax treatments for residents of Canada. If you stop being a resident of Canada, it's expected that your RSP, the value that's held within it, collapses and must all be recognized at once. Now, simply leaving Canada will not automatically result in a collapse or termination of the RSP. The plan collapses when you cease to be a resident. So if I'm moving to another country just to fulfill a job contract, but I'm planning to come back, I'm still a resident of Canada, the RSP will hold. But if I move to another country, I'm going to move there, I break my residential ties, I'm no longer a resident. Well, the tax benefits of holding that RSP account will no longer be available to me. So I will have to consider that entire amount to be withdrawn. It will be subjected to the same withholding tax rules it usually is. Potentially, there could be a low rate if the where I moved to has a tax treaty with Canada. So instead of being taxed at the full bracket amount all at once, perhaps at 53%, maybe there's a tax treaty where that country has their own pension functions. And so maybe I'm able to transfer the amount and only recognize a small income amount in Canada at the time, say 10%. Taxation of RSP in new country depends on many factors. It would depend on the tax treaty and what rules that country has. Taxation and treatment of pension funds is very different around the world. So if you're moving to a country and you have an RSP and it's expected to be collapsing, you can decide whether to leave it in the account, and maybe there's programs and policies in the new country you can transfer to. Otherwise, you might have to functionally just withdraw the full amount, pay the full taxes that were on the balance up to this point, and then those are after tax funds you take with you to the next country. If you have outstanding home buyer plans or lifelong learning plans, those amounts need to be repaid. So those amounts need to be repaid on the filing date for year of departure or 60 days after becoming a non-resident. If I don't repay those balances, then they are automatically included in net income after the deadline. So if I have a method of which to save myself from that RSP collapse in the new country, I have to at least make sure that these loans I took are paid back, because if not, they're all fully recognized in my net income that year. Other than being a non-resident, the other item that might cause an RSP to suddenly collapse is if I should pass away. So my RSP exists for my retirement. The amount in my RSP has been protected from taxes for this whole time. For the time I've made my contribution, it's been earning investment income. No taxes have been taken up to my date of death. So once I've passed away, my RSPs are fully recognized at that time, at that moment of death. And so they all have to be fully included in my income. So unmatured RSPs, the fair market value of all property in RSP at time of death, deemed received immediately before death. So we include in the deceased net income. If the RSP is matured, the fair market, so a matured RSP has been converted to some sort of annuity or RIF account. So we need to figure out the fair market value of all remaining annuity payments at time of death. So if I'm collecting an annuity, I don't get all of that money at one time. But because now that I've passed away, we will still recognize that income based on a present value calculation. Say, okay, all the payments I was going to receive is worth this much today. We recognize in the deceased income. If the annuity is still in place, those amounts will still be collected by the estate, but the taxes for it have already been recognized and covered. Normally, the annuities don't continue. The person's passed away, so the financial institution will just pay out the present value balance. And so the income being recognized is the same as being collected. But if whatever the remaining amount is, if the annuity continues, the income's being collected, but the taxes have already been paid. So we're not concerned with it. Distribution of RSP assets on death. So it's preferable that an annuitant specify a beneficiary in the RSP contract. So since an RSP might have hundreds of thousands of dollars in it, we don't want to recognize that income all at once. So when you register your RSP, you can identify a beneficiary. Most commonly, this is a spouse, so that when I pass away, whatever balance is in my RSP will now transfer to their name and they can continue to hold it as an RSP. So the assets will be transferred immediately at death, so I won't have that income inclusion. And I can also protect it from probate fees, which is a court process where you have additional fees for um, your asset accumulation at death. So not only can we save the taxes, but we could also save probate by making sure our RSP transfers on our death. So exceptions, an unmatured RSP, if the spouse is the sole beneficiary, it's considered to transfer. There's no income tax consequences to deceased or spouse if transferred to RSP with spouse as an annuitant. So your spouse can take control of it with no immediate tax consequences. Matured RSP, the spouse is the sole beneficiary. There's no income tax consequences to deceased, but now those annuity payments are included in the spouse's income. If the spouse is beneficiary of the estate, the same rollover results achieved as above through elections. So there's a lot of rules that if two individuals are married or common law partners, transferring those RSP amounts is supposed to be very easy. It's expected it's going to go to the spouse. So they will continue to defer the taxes until they've passed away. And then once they've passed away, all of that income will be recognized in their income. Transfers on death of financially. So if there's transfers to death to a financially dependent child, you can still do so potentially at a tax-free situation, but it's a much more complex process. The process to transfer from spouse is super common, and so they've made the process very easy. But if you've passed away and you still have a financially dependent children, that RSP and its income and all that money can be held for the benefit of the child, but it takes a lot more steps through setting it up through a trust and etc. So we don't go through all those steps in this course. Generally focus on the spouse. The spouse can get, if the spouse is the beneficiary, she can get all of those funds tax-free. The HPB and LPP balances, the unpaid balance, lifelong learning plan, they put LPP, but unpaid balance included in deceased net income. Surviving spouse can elect to assume the position of the deceased and continue repayments. So if there's amounts that are supposed to be repaid to the RSP, like the rest of the RSP, that can be immediately included in income. If the RSP is transferred to the spouse, they can say, okay, I will continue the payments, and therefore there's not going to be an immediate income recognition. So if you end your residency, you kind of have to recognize that income unless the tax treaty can protect you. And if you pass away, you recognize all of that income unless you have a spouse who can take over the account and take over those repayment obligations. Okay, so that's the end of collapsing RSPs. When we come back, we'll talk about other pension plans other than the RRSP. RSP is definitely the focus of this chapter, but we'll touch on the subjects of other registered accounts you might have in your name. Thank you for your time. See you in the next video.